Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're plunging into a world that, well, at first glance might seem pretty distant. An Italian Renaissance court. Specifically, we're using a really iconic text as our map, Baldesar Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier.
That's right. Our source material for this deep dive comes straight from excerpts of that book. It was written early 16th century, but it's capturing discussions from, a few years before that.
And our mission today is really to take you inside that world, to pull out what Castiglione, through these conversations he recorded, says were the essential qualities, the skills, the social dynamics. Basically what you needed to thrive as a gentleman or lady in those, well, influential circles.
Yeah, and get ready to see what they valued back then. Some of it might actually surprise you.
It's less about a dry history lesson, right? More about understanding the ideals they were aiming for.
Exactly. The ideals they discussed, debated, maybe even sometimes didn't quite live up to. It's kind of a blueprint for a certain type of perfection, straight from the source.
Okay, so let's dive in. Maybe start by setting the scene. Where exactly are we?
We are primarily in the court of Urbino. This is during the time of Duke Guidobaldo di Montefeltro. And Castiglione really highlights the influence, the presence of the Duchess Elisabetta Gonzaga.
Right, and he paints this picture. It's quite different from maybe the stern political places we might imagine. He calls it an abode of mirth.
Yeah, gentle discussions and innocent pleasantries. It wasn't just about power politics. It was a cultural hub, you see.
Attracting poets, musicians.
Thinkers, yeah. He describes them as the most excellent men in Italy. It was a place where intellectual life, social life, really flourished.
And the book itself, it's not just him writing his opinions, is it? It's structured as conversations, like a game played over several nights.
That's the framework.
So who are the key voices? Who's actually doing the talking in these discussions, according to the text?
Well, obviously the Duchess is there. Then there's my lady Amelia Pia. She often seems to be the one guiding things, the mistress of us all, he calls her, keeping it lively, keeping it on track. And then you have figures like Messer Federico Fregoso, Messer Gaspar Pallavicino. He often takes a more, let's say, cynical view.
Right.
Messer Cesare Gonzaga, the Count Ludovico da Canossa, the famous poet Messer Pietro Bembo, Messer Bernardo Bibbiena, the sculptor Gian Cristoforo Romano. I mean, it's a real mix of leading minds, different personalities, each bringing their own angle.
Quite a guest list.
Yeah.
So with this incredible group, what do they first agree on? What's the absolute foundation for the ideal courtier?
Well, they start, perhaps predictably for the time, with gentle birth, being born into a good family. That's seen as the fundamental starting point, although even that gets debated a bit later on.
But it's not just about your family name, is it? What's his true profession, as they call it?
Arms. Skill in warfare. That's just non-negotiable. It's like the core of his identity.
Okay, so he has to be a warrior.
Yeah.
But there's a crucial qualifier they add almost immediately.
Yes, and it's important. This skill, this military prowess, must be shown without arrogance. No boasting. It's about quiet competence, not loud bravado.
And physically, what's the ideal build? What abilities are needed?
He should be well built, shapely, strong, but also lightness, suppleness. It's not just about brute strength, it's athletic grace.
The text gets really specific about the physical exercises required, doesn't it? It's not just general fighting ability.
Oh, no, it's highly refined. Handling every sort of weapon, foot and horse. Understanding their advantages. Knowing the gentlemanly weapons. Excelling in Italian horsemanship, that means controlling wild horses, tilting, jousting, shining in French tourneys, and even things like Spanish exercises, stick throwing, casting spears and darts. It's a comprehensive list, almost like an Olympic-level expectation of martial skill.
Wow. That's incredibly demanding. But amidst all this talk of weapons and fighting and strength, the text seems to pivot to something else, something equally, maybe even more important. Grace.
Yes, exactly. This is where the ideal really starts to take shape. A certain good judgment and grace, that has to temper everything he does, everything he says. It should stamp all his movements, all his actions.
And closely linked to that is avoiding affectation, trying too hard. The text uses a great image here, doesn't it?
It does. They contrast someone just letting their clothes fall naturally with someone who's constantly fussing, adjusting every little detail, checking mirrors, that deliberate effort, that lack of naturalness that's seen as a major fault.
And this applies really strongly to how you speak, too.
Absolutely. They really call out people who, adopt foreign accents or sprinkle in foreign words just to sound learned. like some Lombards mentioned in the text.
And the interesting point they raise is that language does change naturally.
Right.
You shouldn't force yourself to sound only like the ancient writers, ignoring how people actually speak now. It's about finding your own, authentic voice.
It is. And speaking well, it requires good judgment. Knowing when to speak, what to say, avoiding things like pointless laughter. They even quote Catullus on that.
So we've got arms, grace, avoiding affectation. What about the intellectual side? The text gets into a classic debate here.
Ah, yes, the age-old debate. Arms versus letters. The Count, Ludovico da Canossa, he champions arms as the main thing, the primary focus. Letters. Well, letters are just an ornament.
But there's a counter-argument, right? Elevating letters because they pertain to the mind.
Yes, that letters are superior, dealing with the intellect, whereas arms are just physical.
And the Count's come back.
It's quite clever, actually. He says, well, arms involve both mind and body. And what's more, arms provide the noble material, the heroic deeds that writers then get to write about and immortalize. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
It is. And that tension, between action and contemplation, physical skill and intellectual pursuits.
Yeah.
It's the core theme, isn't it? Still resonates.
Definitely.
Okay, so beyond letters, what other accomplishments are expected?
Music is seen as essential. Singing well, especially reading music or accompanying yourself on the viol. They emphasize the sweetness, the ability to understand melody.
But there's that funny distinction they make. Flutes or rebecks are seen as a bit common.
Yeah, more for peasants or shepherds, they say, unless played with truly exceptional skill. It's about refinement.
And they even talk about music for older men.
Right, acknowledging that its role changes. Maybe older men enjoy understanding the harmony intellectually rather than, performing.
Knowledge of painting is also mentioned as valuable. Not necessarily being a great painter yourself, but having the judgment.
Yes, judgment to appreciate and understand art, ancient and modern statues, vases, buildings, medals, cameos. It's about having a discerning eye. And this sparks another debate, doesn't it?
Yes. Painting versus sculpture.
It does. The Count, maybe surprisingly, favors painting. He argues it's more susceptible to showing true skill.
But Giancristoforo Romano, the sculptor who's actually present in the discussion,
he naturally defends sculpture, citing the pains involved, the skill required, the dignity, the sheer endurance of the medium.
And the Count's response is fascinating. He says praising Michelangelo's painting is praising the artist, not necessarily proving painting itself is superior.
It's a really subtle point, isn't it, about judging the craftsman versus judging the craft itself.
It is. And all these qualities, martial, artistic, intellectual, they have to be used wisely, right? Practically.
Exactly. Knowing when and where, adapting to your audience, you speak differently with men than with women, for instance.
And practicing those non-professional skills like music or dance, it should look effortless.
Yes. Like it's just a sport, something you do for fun, not something you're desperately trying hard at or constantly seeking praise for.
Modesty is key.
Very much so. Even if you are praised, you should show a kind of reluctance to accept it fully, a certain nonchalance.
So we have this incredibly detailed picture of the ideal gentleman, the courtier.
Mm-hmm.
How does the text then turn to the court lady?
Well, it aims to describe a court lady with her own set of perfections, sort of mirroring the approach they took for the courtier.
But right away, there's a bit of controversy, isn't there? Some voices, like that cynic Gaspar.
Yeah, Gaspar and another character, Frizio, they suggest her proper calling is basically cooking and spinning, a very limited view.
But others push back.
Oh, yes. Emilia Pia, for instance, desires a much higher standard of perfection for women. She wants more.
And the qualities described for this ideal lady, they borrow from the gentleman's list, but with changes.
Exactly. She needs good manners, appropriate physical exercises, but her main focus seems to be on her conversation, her discourse. It should be rich, prudent, virtuous, pleasant.
Okay.
She shouldn't mix serious and playful talk inappropriately, and definitely shouldn't pretend to know things she doesn't. That affectation again.
Beauty is mentioned too, but it's not just about being passively beautiful.
No, she should take care with her appearance, yes. Choosing clothes that enhance her grace. And if she has a naturally cheerful sort of beauty, her movements, her words, her dress, everything should reflect that inner quality.
And a major point, reflecting the times, is the absolute need to avoid immodesty. Vulgar jokes are out.
This is where the double standard of the era really comes through. Free living, loose talk, tolerated far less in women than in men. And Castiglione makes this really sharp observation. He cautions women against constantly prying into and gossiping about other women's affairs. He suggests they often do this just to make their own faults seem less significant by comparison.
That feels remarkably timeless, that observation.
Yeah.
This difference in expectation leads directly into what sounds like a really heated debate in the book.
Oh, it is. It's framed around the fundamental question of the worth of women versus men. Gaspar, supposedly citing learned men, presents this, frankly, deeply misogynistic view.
Which is?
That nature aims for perfection in man, and that woman is essentially a defect, a mistake of nature. Incapable of men's virtues, contributing nothing but children. It's pretty stark.
Wow, okay. And how is this countered? Who speaks up against this?
The Magnifico Giuliano steps in, and he counters it with real force and eloquence.
Oh.
Well, first, he just points to the worthy ladies actually present in the room as living proof against the claim. Then he argues nature aims for perfection in both sexes. Neither can even procreate without the other, so how can one be a mistake?
He uses historical examples too, doesn't he? And even theological ones.
Yes, he brings up women repairing the original transgression, thinking of the Virgin Mary, and then he recounts these powerful stories of female virtue and courage.
Like who?
Epicharis and Leanna enduring torture better than knights, Spartan women dying for their country, Saguntine women, German women who killed themselves rather than lose their honor. These aren't passive figures.
And he mentions recent examples too.
Queen Isabella of Spain, noted for her wisdom in war and governance. Duchess Isabella of Aragon, showing virtue even in misfortune. His core argument is basically, women have never been inferior in worth, not even in ancient times. And a noble cavalier, he says, has a duty to defend women against false accusations, especially about chastity.
That's a really strong rebuttal, using history, contemporary figures, philosophy. But Gaspar, the cynic, he doesn't just shut up, does he? He has a comeback.
He does, a cynical one. He suggests women only hold back from desire because of shame or fear of getting a bad reputation, not from genuine lack of will. He implies their virtue is just social pressure.
And how does the Magnifico respond to that?
With more stories. Specific, moving anecdotes about women who chose honor, virtue, even when facing intense passion or disgrace, even when it meant death.
Like the peasant girl.
Julia, yes, who loved intensely but maintained her continence for years, gave no sign, and eventually died of anguish, preferring she apparently had secret opportunities.
And the woman killed by her sister.
Right. After being raped and resisting, she didn't reveal it, just gave directions to her sister to kill her rather than live disgraced, choosing death over shame. And the Roman widow who stayed loyal to her dead husband, refusing all suitors despite hardship.
These aren't just abstract arguments then. They're illustrations meant to prove the point with concrete, maybe idealized, but powerful examples.
Exactly. His final plea in this section is really quite moving. Don't deny women their true praises. It's clear Castiglione is presenting this whole debate to showcase female excellence against those prevailing dismissive views.
Okay, moving away from those, well, quite heavy debates, the text also gets practical about court life, social dynamics. Friendship, for instance.
Friendship is praised very highly. Gives life its greatest good, he says. Don't dismiss it just because some people abuse the name.
And conversation itself is a key skill. Again, judgment is crucial.
Always having something agreeable to say, suited to your listeners, refreshing people's minds with pleasant wit.
And watching your mood is important too.
Definitely. Don't be grumpy or melancholy, especially around the prince. Avoid bad-mouthing lords. And a cardinal sin. Boring repetition. Nobody likes hearing the same thing over and over.
You have to adapt your approach too, right? Depending on who you're talking to.
Men versus women, yes. And avoid those rustic or stupid jokes just to get a laugh or curry favor with the boss.
There's also advice on making a good first impression, which sounds vital.
Crucial, especially if you're new or unknown. You have to skillfully present your worth. Ideally, your good reputation should arrive before you do. The text is quite blunt. Failing at this is fatal.
And a warning about getting maybe too comfortable with joking around.
Yeah. Don't gain so much freedom through being funny that you think you can just say anything that pops into your head without thinking about the consequences. There are still boundaries.
That leads us nicely into the whole section on humor and pleasantry. They really analyze it, don't they?
They really do. They break it down into two main kinds. First, there's humorous narrative, basically telling a funny story about something that happened. They say nature creates this, you don't need much art. Like the story of the guy who thought a spear wound was just a fly sting.
Huh. Okay. And the other main type?
Short, sharp sayings. Arguzi, they call them. Witty remarks. These often have a little bit of a sting, which is considered acceptable if it's done cleverly.
And the text gives loads of examples of these, right? Illustrating different kinds of wit.
Yeah, things like witty put-downs, pointing out blunders, taking words in an unexpected way, using similes, metaphors, even taunts delivered with a very serious face.
Like G. Mothman's comments.
Exactly. About jousting being too serious for play but too trivial for war, or his comment on the young king's agility. It's dry wit.
There's also exaggeration, wordplay.
Double meanings. Pretending not to understand something. The key is always the cleverness, the unexpected turn.
But the effects can vary wildly.
Oh, yeah. Pleasantries can make you laugh, show elegance, carry a hidden barb, or, if done badly or meanly, make someone blush or genuinely angry. You have to consider your audience.
They even discuss practical jokes.
Defined as friendly deceit that doesn't really offend, like the masked men tricking the friar with eggs. Even Boccaccio's clever tricks played by women are mentioned as being fine.
So the rules for pleasantry boil down to, don't be rude, and generally avoid making people upset, unless that's your specific intention and context.
Right, it's an art form. Requires judgment and grace like everything else for the courtier.
Okay, moving on again, the book spends a lot of time on love, capital L.
A very significant topic for them.
And we hear from my Lord Morello again, who seems a bit grounded. He finds sensual love more appealing than some highly idealized version.
Yeah, he questions Bembo's idea of beauty without the body, and he points out, maybe a bit cynically, that lots of beautiful women aren't actually very nice. Maybe pride makes them cruel.
And this prompts Pietro Bembo, who later became a cardinal, a major figure, to give this famous defense of beauty and love.
He really elevates it. Beauty isn't superficial for Bembo. It's sacred, it's good, it comes from the highest good, God, it inspires us.
He says even functional things have beauty.
Ships, columns, yeah. And contemplating earthly beauty is, for him, a step towards contemplating divine beauty. It's a ladder.
And he makes this really crucial distinction between two types of love.
Yes, first, there's sensual love, love for the body. He ultimately calls this evil because it relies on the senses, and the senses can mislead the soul. They're prone to error. It brings suffering, anguish, especially when the beloved is absent. It's permitted, maybe excused in youth because it can inspire some worthy acts, but it's not the best path.
Okay, so what's the alternative? Rational love.
Rational love, that's superior. It's loving beauty itself with the intellect separate from the physical body. This kind of love isn't tormented by absence. It allows the lover, he says, to be transformed into the beloved, to rise above the self towards celestial beauty.
And this is especially relevant for older men.
That's his argument. When youth and the power of the senses fade, older men can find true happiness in this rational, contemplative love, focusing on the intellect.
It's a fascinating philosophical climb, isn't it? From physical desire to pure intellectual appreciation.
But, okay, back down on earth. How does the courtier actually win and keep a lady's favor? The practical advice.
Well, the advice is quite practical and social, actually. You have to love, but you also have to be lovable. Show your love through your manner, reverence, even a certain timidity.
The eyes are important.
Yes. Described poetically as faithful messengers, where spirits meet and receive impressions. A very Renaissance idea.
And you need to prove your own worth. Be valiant, discreet, modest. Show you deserve her more than your rivals do. Be prudent. Avoid stupid mistakes, like using overly fancy, affected language they specifically warn against polyphilian words, referencing a famously dense, ornate style of the time. Don't try too hard to impress with fancy talk.
And secrecy is vital.
Absolutely. Keep the love secret to avoid scandal. Don't make big public displays that could bring blame or infamy on the lady. That would be ungallant.
And don't play games.
Right. Don't provoke jealousy by acting cold or pretending you're interested in someone else. Be constant.
Sounds like a very delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
Sincere affection mixed with careful social strategy.
It really is. Now, the text also, importantly, turns its attention to the top job in the court, the prince.
Right. And that earlier idea about virtue starting as habit and being confirmed by reason gets applied here, too.
Yes. And Ottaviano Fregoso gives this long speech outlining the ideal ruler.
What are some of the key qualities he lists?
Well, the prince should be just, continent, temperate, strong, wise, liberal, magnificent, religious, clement, all the classic virtues. He should be naturally inclined towards worthiness, practiced in good behavior, and ideally aided by the teachings of a wise courtier.
And the ultimate goal for this ruler isn't just power or wealth.
No, it's much deeper. It's to lead his subjects to virtue. The whole purpose of good governance is the moral improvement of the people.
And peace is presented as the real objective.
Yes, peace is the aim of war. Being constantly at war is not okay. A prince who only wants to conquer his neighbors just trains his people to be brutal, not virtuous. In peacetime, the prince needs to focus on the righteous qualities that bring tranquility.
How does this ideal prince actually govern day to day?
By using good judgment, knowing who to trust, who to believe, overseeing his ministers carefully, settling disputes fairly, making peace between subjects, even arranging marriages to kind of unify the city like one big family. He should favor merchants, be generous to foreigners, support the church.
And there's that interesting point about moderating. Superfluities, extravagance among the people.
Right. Limiting how much people spend on sumptuous houses, huge feasts, massive dowries, women's luxury like jewels and fancy clothes. This is seen as countering folly, promoting a more temperate, virtuous society. It's quite interventionist.
And he must reward merit properly.
Yes. Maintain equality and justice and basic liberty, but create inequality in rewards and honors. These should be based strictly on merit, and ideally, the reward should even exceed the merit shown, as an incentive for others.
And the outcome of all this, if a prince rules like this,
He'll be loved, adored by his people. He won't need foreign guards because his own subjects protect him. He rules well and finds he has more cause to praise good behavior than to punish bad.
they mentioned some historical examples of rulers who fit this mold, patrons of arts and culture.
Yeah, Duke Federico of Urbino himself, famous for his library, Alexander the Great for founding cities, Octavianus Augustus for his building projects in Rome, rulers who left a lasting positive legacy.
Okay, finally, the conversations touch on some broader philosophical ideas about human nature itself. Virtue, ignorance.
Right, the idea that virtue isn't purely innate, it has to be cultivated.
And that ignorance is the root cause of nearly all human mistakes.
Temperance gets highlighted, the fountain of virtues.
And they discuss how moral virtues aren't natural in the way a stone naturally falls down. You can't get used to something that's fundamentally contrary to your nature. And vices aren't natural in that sense either.
It's about choice and habit.
People choose evil, they suggest, either because they mistakenly think it's good or because they prioritize immediate pleasure over some future fear, like thieves or murderers.
True pleasure is identified with good, true suffering with evil. And interestingly, passions, anger, hatred, desire, aren't inherently bad. When they're moderated by temperance, they can actually help virtue. Wrath can aid strength, hatred can aid justice. Reason needs passions to actually get things done.
Without passion, reason is weak.
Exactly. And a final little psychological observation. People tend to hide their natural defects, physical or mental, more than they hide ignorance about something they just haven't studied.
Why?
Because a natural defect feels like a reproach, like nature failed you. Whereas not knowing something, well, you just haven't learned it yet. It's less shameful.
That's a very human insight into pride and shame, isn't it?
It really is.
Wow. Okay, that was quite the whirlwind tour through the mind of the Renaissance elite. We've seen this detailed blueprint for the ideal courtier, the ideal court lady, cover everything from, well, dueling and dancing to painting and deep philosophical debates.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it, how much thought went into cultivating not just the practical skills, but social presence, moral character, intellectual depth. The ideal was just incredibly multifaceted.
And those debates we heard, the clash between arms and letters, those really intense arguments over the worth and nature of women, Bimbo's philosophical ascent of love, they feel surprisingly, well, current in some ways.
They really do. They show that these fundamental questions, what makes a person truly excellent? How should we live? How should men and women relate? They've been wrestled with for centuries.
Think about the contradictions baked into the ideal they present. You need to be a fierce warrior and have delicate artistic taste.
Or that stark contrast between raw sensual desire and Bembo's pure rational love. What does that internal conflict tell us about the complexity of human ambition, human desire back then and, well, even today?
Or consider that vision of the ideal prince. He's not just a powerful ruler, he's a moral guide, aiming for his subjects' virtue, even regulating their spending on clothes and parties.
Yeah, how does that compare to modern ideas about leadership, the role of the state, individual freedom? It's quite different.
This deep dive, it really gives us such a unique window into the values, the concerns, the aspirations of a really pivotal era.
It's a great reminder that while times change, the settings change. So many of these core questions about human nature, social interaction, the pursuit of an ideal life, they persist.
So maybe something to ponder as you go about your day. In our own quest for excellence or worthiness today, what qualities do we prioritize? And how do the expectations and values of our own social circles, our workplaces, our friends, online communities, how do they shape our understanding of the ideal?
A good question to leave folks with. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.